time. On you,
Okay,
Kevin.
okay, well, so what I was saying is, I've told a lot of stories about the Marine Corps and about my training, but I never really talked necessarily about my experiences outside of combat as a combat photographer. And in garrison, we actually keep pretty busy. When I was in Iwakuni, Japan, there were two instances where I was utilized by PMO, the MPs. And they, everyone has, we all have our phones now, so anybody can take photos, but that wasn't the case back in 2003, So they would use a duty photographer, and basically one of us would have a little pager, a little beeper, and if you got paged, you had to call PMO and they would tell you where to meet. So the first time I was actually at work and I was the duty photographer and they called the shop. And there was a Japanese, so the Iwakuni Marine Corps Air Station Iwakuni is half the not the JGSDF, but the naval version of it. I'm so sorry, I don't remember the naval version of the Japanese Defense Force. But anyway, the Japanese Navy shares the base with us, and they have half of it. And some Japanese reconnaissance aircraft was doing touch and goes at the runway and stalled somehow and crashed, and everyone on board was killed. So they had me come out, and I had to take photos of everything. I had to document everything from the entire crash, starting from where they touched ground and then started back up and stalled. And so, I mean, it was a good, like 700 yards span. But anyway, I got to go in the aircraft area, I guess, because the aircraft was in pieces. And I took photos of everything. I mean, if you can think of it, then I took photos of it. And then they put me in a helicopter and I had to take aerial photos of it. So we have to document any kind of incidences, like aircraft crashes, vehicle crashes, anything like that. And the second story I wanted to tell is along the same lines at the same base. It was like 2 a.m. and the fire alarms went off in the barracks. And I woke up and I was like, that fuck is going on? It must be a fire drill. Until I opened my door and the whole hallway was just black smoke. It was fucking insane. I mean, this was a trip. I was just like, I mean, yeah, I was pretty scared to be honest, because I was on the third deck of the barracks. And the third deck was the same deck that the MPs lived on. So I lived on the same deck as the MPs at that time. Well, we had to evacuate the barracks. They pulled us all out. We got into formation and they made sure everyone was alive. Anyway, I was again the duty photographer. So I had my camera kit and I had to go back inside the barracks once the fire was contained. And I went to the barracks room. That Marine was an MP. He was an MP, and he had gotten drunk in his barracks room, lit a bunch of candles, and fell asleep. And he burned the barracks down. A third story that I just thought of because I was, I I'm on a roll with these right now, but a third one was there were two Marines, and this is kind of a gruesome one. These two Marines got really drunk in their barracks room to where their entire barracks room floor was covered in beer cans and liquor bottles. You couldn't see the carpet. I mean, they were drunk, drunk. And apparently, one of them was leaning out the window of the second deck to have a cigarette, and the other one thought it would be funny to push him. So he went out and, like, face first, dead, right into the cement. And I got called out for that. I had to take the photos of that on the outside, and then I had to go up to the room, and it was like I said, I mean, the whole floor was beer cans and bottles. And I remember seeing that Marine, the drunk Marine, and he was just sitting there laughing about. I mean, he didn't really understand what was going on, and he was just like, "Why are you all in my room?" Kind of just, I mean, shit faced. But all that to say, that's the kind of stuff that I did also. So when I wasn't forward doing like intelligence gathering and reconnaissance, I was in the rear just doing bullshit documentation, crime scenes. I took photos of an autopsy one time, just random crap like that. So yeah, thanks for letting me get that out there. I wanted to point that out because that's a very important part of our job. I think a lot of people just think of the combat photography as combat photography, but we're only in combat, a small percentage of the time. So when we're back in garrison at our bases, we have things that we have to do there too. And being the duty photographer was just one of them. So, yeah.
Well, to build off of that, because that opens up my eyes. The previous combat cameramen and photographers I've talked to, that's never come up of what they did when they weren't in country. What they did before they went to Vietnam and then afterwards while they were still in the Corps. But for you, and even for some of the pre-combat deployments that you went on, seeing in many ways a lot of traumatic events where you are witnessing sites that we're necessarily not meant to see. You are seeing human gore. How do you compartmentalize that? How do you try to put that in the back of your head and do your job?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't let it. I think that's you're going to get a different answer from every single person you ask that question to. But I never did let it compartmentalize. I grew up in the woods. I killed a lot of little animals, not like out of cruelty just to eat them, I mean, death was pretty normal to me. Seeing humans killing each other, as fucked up as this sounds, it doesn't bother me near as much as like seeing an animal get killed. I know that's pretty rotten. I've talked to many therapists about it, but like I've seen a person get blown apart by the main gun on a tank. You know what I'm saying? And doesn't that doesn't bother me. I didn't lose a wink of sleep. But if I see a roadkill, like a little cute squirrel, man, I'm torn up. Like yeah, I'm done for the day. You know what I'm saying? Like I really don't know to answer your question. I never compartmentalized any of it. It was there. I was present in it. A lot of the emotion has to be pushed aside in the moment so that I can continue to perform. But I was always extremely aware. I was aware of the mortality of the deceased around me. I was aware of the mortality of my enemy, and I was extremely aware of my own mortality at all times.
Well, to kind of build off of the initial question I have and with the response you get there, which I get to think about the animal concept. You and I had that conversation, I think, last time off of the Shine talking, but that's neither here nor there. Um, when you go back to these crime scene photographs, the autopsy photographs, taking photographs of the crash site in Japan, when you get those photographs, who does that card now go to? Like who gets a hold and controls these photographs, especially when you're working with the Japanese military?
Well, the process for us, well, I didn't take those photos for the Japanese military. I'm sure they had their own photographer come out and do their thing. Like all of this, as far as I know, stayed with us.
Okay.
But what happens is, so I don't give the card to anyone ever actually, because I had my own clearance. I had a really good clearance actually. What I would do is I would come back to my office. I would sit on a computer, a secured computer, and I would get into Photoshop. I would, crop everything as it needed to be cropped. There's an automate kind of tool within the old Photoshop. This is like Photoshop 4 or 3, Photoshop 3.0. This is way back in the day, and they still had the automate feature. Honestly, if you look at the newer one, not the new ones, but like if you go up to like CS, all the way back, they're all basically the same, and it's just they built on the same platform. You know what I mean? So anyway. They had an automate feature. I would resize everything to where it needed to be resized because a lot of the stuff would have to be beamed up via satellite, and I shot everything raw. So it was like a huge file that I needed to make smaller. Plus, there's another program called Media Grid, and what it does is you open Media Grid, you select your photo files, and what it does is it goes into each file's metadata and embeds your caption within the metadata of the file. So when I open up a photo on my computer, right, it pops it up and I'm looking at it. Well, the metadata within it I can't see unless I have a program like Media Grid. And what Media Grid does is it pulls specific metadata out, and that's where I would embed my captions. So I would write my captions within Media Grid, have everything in it would change all of the file names and put them in a sequential order, which would be like the 6-digit date. It would be like year, month, date, dash M for Marines, dash the last four of my social security number M, So it would be dash XXXM from McCall dash and then a three-digit sequential number, and it would be one to whatever, 999. And from there, I would give them all to my staff NCO, and that is where my chain of custody ends. I would gather the intelligence. I would get it ready to be presented for whatever need. Put my information within it in case anyone ever needs to come back and see what was going on in the information, all of the names, all of the places, and that I took the photos, so they can always find me. And then I would give it to my staff NCO, and they would either give it to intelligence or they would give it to the XO of our unit. And usually, if it was going to the XO, that meant it was something more directly related to planning, which would be like more reconnaissance photos. If I was taking reconnaissance photos, those go to Intel, but they usually go to the XO who takes them to Intel. You know what I mean? Because he's a big part of the planning process. So, yeah.
Thank you. That's actually interesting to see the work that you have to put into after the photographs are taken. How long, just out of curiosity, do you think that you probably spent working in Photoshop and editing and captioning? How long does that take if you had to put it all together?
Well, I had it down. So, you do it enough times and you kind of get it narrowed down. So I got it like on a routine 8 hour patrol where nothing really happened, right? So we would go out on our 8 hour patrol, search some houses, walk around, show our presence, and then come back to the fob. I would usually take around 120 photos the whole time. And that's just taking photos of rooftops, or if I see someone that looks suspicious, or I just see a good photo I want to take. I usually come back with around 120. I submit around 60 to 70 of those. So I would get back and I would get all of my photos, and I would, as I said, insert the metadata and everything, but then I would only, send up maybe 60 of those, and only 60 of them would have captions and information embedded on them. I'm sorry, could you say the question one more time?
How long it takes you, from
Okay, yeah,
editing
yeah,
to
yeah.
captioning?
So, doing those 60 photos, like I said, I had it kind of down to a routine. Doing those 60 photos, editing them in Photoshop, putting all of the metadata in it, getting the caption information because I would take notes, but I would still have to go find the squad and be like, hey, who is this? Who is this? Who is this? To get their full name, their full rank, and whatever, their squad was, everything. And we would go on an 8 hour patrol, and probably 3 hours after we get back, I'm still working. It would be it was exhausting work just going on the patrol. And we would get back, and it took about 3 hours for 60 to 70 photos to be complete and sent up. That's including the time it took me to edit them, caption them, and upload them via satellite to wherever they needed to be. So about 3 hours. So it would be 8 hours of work plus 3 hours of work. And then I would go to sleep for 5 hours and do it all again.
On top of, this is a question that just gets spawned as you've figured this out. Um, all the work that you've done, the photographs that you've submitted, what's the biggest photograph you took that got probably the most media presence? Maybe made it to Leatherneck, maybe it's out there floating on the internet that people have seen in some capacity. But the one that was the biggest for you.
Oh, that one I showed you in that video that I sent you in the Marines magazine. That was the biggest one that ever really made it out. I had a lot of photos that are in a lot of places. I think I mentioned before, once our photos are released, they're out, and a lot of time the credit will be scratched off of it and it'll just say AP photo or something like that. And I have seen tons of my photos on jihadist websites. And like they're using it as anti-American propaganda, actually. I've seen it on like LARPing websites. I've seen airsoft teams use my photos on their websites. Like there was a long time ago, there was an actual when I was with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit, there was an airsoft team called the 15th MEU. And we had like 15thMEU.org, and they actually had 15thMEU.com. And man, it pissed me off so much. But anyway, they used a lot of our photos also. It's always the most unexpected places. That's where I've seen my photos used. I've seen them in weird places, usually on some really crazy, you know, alt-right or alt-left, just nutcase, absolute conspiracy theory website. I've seen a ton of them on there. I really have. I've also seen, yeah, I've just seen them in some weird places. Yeah.
I think for one of our podcasts that we're gonna do, we're gonna try to find the different crazy ass websites these pictures are on, because that sounds like a
There,
fun idea.
There was a guy who had posted on some forum. He had posted like 5 or 6 of my photos and was pretending to be me. He was like, "Yeah, I took these photos," and and then he shared the credits, and it said, USMC photo by Corporal Kevin McCall, and he just went on about like, "Yeah, I took these during this, and you can see they're doing this and having this combat situation," and it's just like, this is a joke, man. Like who even is this fucking guy who found some photos and just decided to like I don't even know what he's doing, man. Like I said, the LARPing people, they're out there live action role playing, pretending they're something they're not. So I've seen a lot of that. Yeah, it's as far as my photos making it out into the public though, that really wasn't my job. That was more of a public affairs thing. So while they do use a lot of our photos, that's I mean, 90% of my photos were always classified. Of all the photos I took in the Marine Corps, probably 90% never went anywhere. They went up to Intel and they weren't released, they weren't classified, and they stopped right there. And that 10%, probably 2%, were published. So I mean, it's they don't really use our shit. A lot of our stuff got used for like moto posters, and so when you see like the motivational posters with a photo from Iraq or something, they use a lot of our stuff for that because it's U.S. government property. The photo is, so they can use it for whatever they want, and they don't have to pay for it.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it's by 2030, well, and even by 2020, if my math is correct, hold on, 2028, 25 years, a lot of your stuff that's in the National Archives would be technically supposed to be getting declassified. Therefore, you
Yeah.
could go pull it and absolutely scan it and bam. So, might be worth the trip, but that's just me. Anyhow, that transition into our next point, though, of when you talk about your job and the realities of it. On our first interview, we I brought up 9/11. It was impactful for you, impactful for me, but you made a profound statement that I actually used with my students today. And in that statement, you said that, after 9/11, we wanted someone to hate, but we didn't know who to hate. So take that mindset from 2002, how did that transition for you to 2005 when you were in Iraq on your first combat deployment?
Oh man, that's a good question. So that. I feel like I changed more in those couple years than I probably did between like, 35 and 40. I I was so young and I was still coming of age technically. I was 17 years old in 2002. Um I was raised in a very religious, very Fox News family in South Carolina. So when America was attacked, I was in military school. I hadn't seen my family in a while. But I still shared their values and their beliefs. I I enlisted. I had my teeth, my knife in my teeth, ready to go fight some terrorists. I was ready to go do it, man. And I felt like my morals and my religion would justify everything that I was ready to do. It did justify everything that I was ready to do, but that's only because I was 17. I I had no fucking clue what I was about to do, honestly. I had no idea. I don't think anyone 17 should be able to go in the military, but that's neither here nor there. When I went to Iraq, I had already deployed. I had been some places, I'd been to Japan and I went all the places I went while I was there. I'd been to Haiti. I'd been to cold weather training. I'd done all kinds of other exercises, and then I did a bunch of courses, machine gunners course, all kinds of crap. By then I'd seen a little bit of the world, Not only was I a little more experienced, but I was a little more jaded. That that wear that just comes along with being alive, on top of being alive as a Marine, being alive during the global war on terror, losing my friends constantly. I lost a lot of friends, especially there at the beginning. Um, I guess toward the end too, afterward also. But Yeah, yeah. Sorry, man. I'm just gonna keep going on a tangent if you let me.
Hey, it's all good, brother. Um, well, talking about that viewpoint for early Kevin, we're talking 2005. What's your first combat experience like from your perspective on this combat deployment? Take me through that day, whatever happened, and the unit you were with, and the process that you're going through.
Well, as I was saying, I'd already seen some stuff, so it wasn't necessarily new. But as I was also saying, I was pretty jaded by this point. I had lost some friends. I had in some ways lost my religion. I lost my moral basis that I grew up with, and I lost who I was. So by the time I was in Iraq and I was fighting these people, I didn't necessarily dehumanize anyone except for myself. I never did anything necessarily hurtful to anyone except for myself. I went into Iraq with the entirely wrong mindset. I went to fight. Yeah, but I went knowing that the people that I was going to be fighting weren't really my enemy. Knowing that they didn't know their ass from their elbow any more than I did. I know a little bit more about math and science than they do. That's the big difference. I grew up around religious zealots. I've seen what they do. I know exactly what people are going to be doing in these situations. So by the time I got there and I saw combat, I was so worn out by all of it. I was worn out by humanity. I was worn out by the politics, and I was worn out by everything. So when I got shot at in Iraq, I just thought it was hilarious. And I know that's the most unexpected thing you'll hear, but I laughed and I laughed and I laughed, and it was exhilarating. And there was nothing in the world for me except for adrenaline. I know that's again, I'm dehumanizing myself once again. I guess I'm dehumanizing my past self, but it was just adrenaline for me. There was nothing but the fight. I'm not saying that I was out looking for a fight, but if it happened, I was there. I was present. I had seen nothing but death for years at this point. I was ending my first enlistment the first time I went to Iraq. Um, I was tired. I was fucking tired more than anything. So when I got there and they started shooting at us, I don't know if it was just the meaningless of the whole situation, the meaningless of life, the meaningless of combat, the meaningless of death, the meaningless of the reason we're killing each other, all of it, all of us killing each other, the meaningless war that I was in, the meaninglessness of the Marine Corps in my mind at a point, when we're not even doing what we were meant to do. It just felt stupid. I mean, I hate to say it, especially on a day like today, but everything that we did just felt pointless. And it was in the end. We just left. Everything that we captured, gone. All of the things that we achieved, thrown away. I mean, and the oligarchs and the plutocrats, whichever side you're on, they don't give a flying fuck about any of us. And the first time I went into combat in Iraq, to answer your question, all of this was in my head. Every bit of this was in my head. I knew that I was a pawn for the rich. I didn't know which side, I was fighting for. I didn't they're both rich, like they're both using me for nefarious means at this point. So that's all I was thinking. Stay alive, stay who I am, and stay connected to reality. I think we all had our ways of coping that we did that, whether it was just acting a fool or sneaking a drink here and there, or when we get back, just ending up offing ourselves. All of those were viable options for every one of us. So, again, how I said it before, you're going to get a different answer for every single person. A lot of people were scared a lot of the first time in combat. This wasn't my first time in combat. A lot of people believed in the war. I did not believe in that war. A lot of people believed our government and our politicians were doing right by us, and I just didn't. I saw that all of these companies were making money hand over fist off of us being deployed there, And that's why I invest today. I invest in all of those companies, like I was telling you before. So again, all of this was going through my head. This is what I was thinking of. This is what stupid ass little 20-year-old, 21-year-old Kevin was thinking. Um, it was politics, it was emotion, it was religious, whatever. It was just this muddled mix of everything because it what that time in America was this muddled mix of everything. Um, to the point where I was getting thanked when I came home for doing God's work. Like what? Like what? Our ACOGs, that the sights on our rifles had a Bible verse stamped on them. Like what? You know, none of this makes sense. It's a verse about being like the sword of God or something. So, I mean, it's insane. It's insane the way people were thinking back then. It's insane the way people are thinking now. The way people were thinking now is a direct reflection of how people were thinking then, just not toward each other back then. They were thinking outward. It was all outward back then. Everyone hated everyone else. And if they looked like the people we were blaming, then they were fucked. You know, that's just how I think that's how America's always been. And it's really scary that it's come to what it is now. But seeing it back then and living it and knowing that's what was going on, seeing in the news them reporting lies about what we were doing, and on both sides, one's reporting that all of us are dead so that they can get public backing to make this big military move, and the other side is saying that not we're all dead, but we killed a bunch of people so that they can undo this other military move, and it was a mess. So again, to answer your question, what was going through my mind was literally everything, and I was trying. I guess, I didn't block out the violence, but I was trying my best to block all of that out. Like I needed it to stop. I needed to not be thinking about what I'm doing because I have to live. I had to live through it, I had to stay alive. I had to keep my friends alive. I had to keep my Marines alive. I just had to do the best I could with the circumstances and the opportunities presented to me. And yeah, I hope I answered your question and didn't just ramble.
Well, I know that when we were talking about some of the different units that you were with in 2005, I know that you will eventually spend some significant time with 325. And for
Yeah.
those that are watching this interview, if you ever hear Kevin and I mention 2232, 325, or anything that sounds like a fraction, that is the battalion and then the regiment that refers to. So in this particular case, 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, like we stated, you ended up spending time with them. And you were with them when they saw the absolute worst um, casualty rate for any unit that was ever deployed to Iraq. At least I can state that much, Iraq, in this time frame, casualty wise. Now, for your perspective here, you mentioned you're trying to keep yourself alive, keep your friends alive. Um, how do you deal with the spiking rate in casualties of 2005, knowing that each time you go out there, whether it's 325, whether it's 3222, that there realistically is a chance that someone's going to get hurt today? How do you go on? How do you function?
I that's another good question, man. I think cognitive dissonance is a big part of it. I kind of denied it at first, but I really think maybe cognitive dissonance, maybe it's just an acceptance of death, or maybe it is that dehumanization of myself. If I'm not even worth living, then why would I care about dying? And I think that was a part of it for me. It was hard for me to shake when I got out. Took me a while, and to my detriment in a lot of ways. I'm sorry, could you repeat the question one more time, and
Brother,
I'll
you're
go a
good,
little
man.
more in depth
You don't
for
got to
you.
apologize. Um, how do you keep yourself from going insane? How do you keep this in the back of your mind that every time that you go out there in this time frame, that realistically a casualty is probable? Someone's going to get hit, IEDs. How do you go on functioning and do your job?
I think that the easiest answer is just don't think about it. Um, I was really wrapped up in what I was doing, and most of the time I was doing my job and I was working really hard. I was focused on, you know, I have so many answers to this question. I'm really conflicted as to how I want to answer it because there was one time I was on a combat patrol and we had seen a little bit of action, but we were pushing through this palm grove on the Euphrates, and we got to this one little point where there was a wadi. It was like a dried out riverbed that kind of went through, and there was a berm on either side. And we got to a point, and like the patrol stopped. They told us to chill for a second, and we all kind of got into the tree line, and we were just sitting there. Well, I sat on the berm right by this little footbridge, and I was just sitting there minding my own business. I had a cigarette. We were all just laughing and joking and doing our thing. And I got up, they called us to start moving. And we got up, we got in the column, and we started going. I mean, not even like 45 seconds later, like 45, 50 seconds later, I hear someone say IED, IED. And I shit you not, exactly where I was sitting in that little berm was the IED. It was like it was a whole daisy chain little mess of explosives that they had put in. They had buried it, and it was rigged kind of to blow up that bridge, but it was all on the side exactly where I was sitting. So I literally sat on an IED. And what do you do but laugh? So I was just like, holy shit, I was just sitting there. I just had a cigarette on that IED. And that sums it all up. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, cool. If it does, I hope it doesn't hurt very much. I hope I get to keep my dignity. I hope it's fast. I hope my family gets to find out in a good way. Um, I think there was a big level of acceptance that played into just being able to survive in all of that. Just accepting that on some level you're already gone, and just move on and do your job while you're here. This is all borrowed time to a point. So use it wisely, kind of attitude.
And well, to feed off of that, um, you bring up a good point about one, doing your job, two, laughing it off. But when you're describing that of on this patrol, it had me thinking, you spend a lot of time with a lot of different Marines, a lot of different units. I assume a lot of different line companies in each battalion. When you alternate the operations you go on, and the for different friends you make in the units, how did you handle when you heard that some of these people had gotten hit or killed, when either you were with them or weren't with them, even though that they were not combat photographers, you get to know these Marines. You spend enough
Yeah.
time with them. How do you handle that?
Um, I tried to think of their families and I tried to think of their fellow Marines. The guys, 325, for example, is a reservist from Ohio, if I'm not mistaken. They all knew each other in civilian life. They all knew each other as Marines. They all knew each other as civilians. They all knew each other as friends. So whenever a Marine was lost that I knew from that unit, I told myself like these guys are a family. Don't make it about me. And I know that sounds really stupid, but I guess that's my coping mechanism was just to tell myself, don't make it about me. It's about them. It's about their family. It's about their unit. It's about their brothers. As much as it hurts me, I had lost family members. At that point, I had lost my mom, my grandmother, my great grandparents. Like I'd lost a lot of my friends. So I had lost a lot of people by that point, and I kind of death wasn't new to me. Yeah, I just kind of told myself not to make it all about me, and I know that sounds really kind of ridiculous, but it worked. It worked for me. Yeah, it helped me get through the next day and the day and the next day and the next day.
Well, in many ways too, building off of that, I mean that's the answer is not uncommon for a lot of the Vietnam guys I talk to, is that it's pushing to that next day. It's what happened today. Um, Take a moment perhaps, but you put it in the back of your mind because you got to focus on getting through today. And once you get through today, it's getting through the next day and the next day and the next day. And then when you get home, that's where it sets in. Whether you want it to or not, that's when those thoughts come in, of where you think about a lot of the things that you tried to put in the back of your minds. Um, but to do a little insert here. Don't know if this is legal or not, but for a great book for people to read about 325, if you're interested, they called us lucky. And it's one that I read. I think I read this book a year ago. Just browsing McKay's, which is a used bookstore here in the Carolinas. Whenever you come here, I'm going to make sure you come physically here to my house at some point, my man. You can get books for like 25 cents. It's awesome. Okay, so if you're looking to stock up, but it's a great insight into Lima 325 and their tour of duty in 2005 and the reality for them.
Yeah, actually, I was walking in Barnes and Noble a couple years back, and I went by the new releases section, and I saw that book, and I saw the photo on the front. I was like, that looks really fucking familiar. And I picked it up and I read what it was, and I couldn't put it down. I didn't want to buy it, but I had to. And then I got home and it was sitting there on the shelf, just staring at me for a good 6 months before I picked it up and read it. That's a good read. I recommend it as well. It was hard for me to get through, but I think everyone will, if they're interested in getting like a first-hand account, really understanding the emotion behind everything, they nailed it.
Well, and speaking of that, and going back to your combat experiences in Iraq for this deployment, knowing that of course you saw them in Haiti, but for your job, at what point, Kevin, do you draw the line where you are no longer a combat photographer and you become a rifleman? When do you make that distinction?
That's really up to me, and then it's up to my CO. Um, I I have been fussed at. Me and actually a lot of my fellow combat cameramen have been fussed at for many, many times for getting into firefights, and Marines are going down around us, and we just get in the fight. We pick up our rifle and just start going at it. And as long as rounds are going down range, photos aren't being taken. So we will get fussed at if we're not taking photos. Will we get punished? No. No one's going to punish us. Like Marines are losing their lives. Bullets are flying at me. Like no one's going to blame me for picking up my rifle and putting a couple rounds down range. It's never going to happen. That said, any intelligence that could have been gathered in that time is not being taken. So you'll see a lot of combat cameramen. I guess you could say they're the best of us who will go through like 4 or 5 combat deployments, see a ton of action, and have no combat action ribbon, because they just never fire their weapon. They never load their weapon. They never do anything with their weapon because they're just using their camera literally the entire time. I tried to implement ways to kind of make it a hybrid situation. So on my rifle, I actually had a little bullet, like a little nipple camera on my rifle. I took the flashlight out and I put it in the flashlight mount. So like I had some footage of like my rifle coming up and pop, 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 like, it was pretty cool. It worked okay. Back in like '05, the camera equipment wasn't the best. So if you have like the shock from a rifle being fired right next to a camera, there's a lot of, distortion within the frame. So, whenever you fire, there's a lot of digital distortion or whatever. But I had a camera on my helmet for a long time. I did that in the Mew also because I was on a helo company, so we would fast rope, and I had a ton of video just of that little camera on my helmet and me fast roping down a 90-foot rope. I mean, it was pretty cool. So it's really up to us. If I'm in a firefight and I'm with the squad, 13 Marines and me. Um, it really depends on how nervous I feel. Now, I don't feel scared of dying necessarily, but I am scared of being caught. I don't want to be caught. If I'm killed, that sucks. I'm not gonna care, But if I'm captured, I'm gonna care a lot. And we go through a lot of training, SEER training, to it's not the SEER school, but SEER training. Everyone can go through the SEER training to learn, what to do if you're taken prisoner and all that. Anyway, it's not pretty what happens to you, and I'm not going to go into detail with all that. So, if I felt like things were getting a little bit extreme, I'd definitely pick up my rifle. I had a rifle and a pistol. I carried more ammunition than the average grunt did. Like, I'm gonna use it. I carried all that shit for a reason. So I did pick up my rifle many times. If I felt um like things were precarious, or when I was saying like being shot at just made me laugh. If I didn't laugh, that's when I was picking up my rifle. I guess that's the best way I can put it. If it if it wasn't inducing adrenaline, then I was picking up my rifle. I definitely put quite a few rounds down range, quite a few times. But more often than not, I would keep my camera in my hand. If I was shooting video, the PD-150s and PD-170s that we use, they had a carrying handle on the top. If you have one of those, you can put your rifle in it and have the carrying handle with the camera down, and you can kind of maneuver with that. But if you're shooting still photo, there's no way to do it. You know, you have to cover your face for one with the camera. You're covering both eyes. You lose all vision, all awareness of everything around you. It's just it's really risky. And you know, I don't mind risking much. I don't mind risking a lot. I don't want to risk everything. And at that point, you're kind of risking everything. That's when I go to my rifle instead of my camera.
That's uh I can't put that in words to how brilliant that response was and the explanation that you gave there. And it's going to feed into this next question. So when these situations are happening, um, especially when you're moving through, I know you've mentioned the city of Hit. We've talked about Haditha, Ramadi, and I've heard even villages too. When this, I assume close quarters is fighting, house to house is taking place, and you're embedding yourself within a squad. Where do you put yourself in that squad? Squads operate in fire teams, so do you put yourself behind the first two fire teams in the rear, or wherever they accept you?
So usually the squad leader will have a like a radio operator with them. And that's, you know, I usually hang out with them, the squad leader. So, you know, typically you'll be in a tactical column. So if I just got with a unit, if I've been with the unit for a while, I've kind of embedded with them. Um, I know how they work and they know how I work. I'll actually work as one of them. But if I'm brand new with a unit, I've never seen these guys before, and I don't know how this unit operates. I don't know their SOP. I don't know their contingencies. Like if we get into a firefight and they're all screaming contingencies at me that are different for every single unit, then I'm not going to know what the fuck they're saying, you know? So it takes me a little bit to be able to where I'm comfortable like making myself part of the line rather than just hanging out in the middle. So if you're in a tactical column, a staggered column, in the center is going to be the squad leader and a radio operator or the platoon sergeant and whoever, you know, the headquarters guys, whatever the fuck. They're usually sent in the center. And when I'm first with a unit, if I get with the guys and we go out that day, I'll usually kind of hang out in the center until I get to know them a little bit better. I never actually embed on a fire team level. I'll embed on a squad level. More often than not, I embed it on a platoon level because it gives me a lot more flexibility. As far as like there's a rotation. There's a QRF rotation. There's a post rotation where you're standing guard on the fob, and then there's a patrol rotation, and you're actually rotating through all three of those. There's probably more I just don't know about, but I would stay with the platoon rather than a squad because a squad is going to be in that rotation, whereas a platoon will be all over that rotation, and I can jump from squad to squad. And if there's like if you know we just got some intel about hey there's some HVI that we heard some high valued individual that's over here at this house and we need to get over there right now. Send the QRF. I can go out with the QRF guys. You know I don't have to stay with this fire team or the squad that's way over here. I can go out with the guys who are in the platoon who are on QRF right now. So if all of that convoluted mess I just explained makes sense, I would usually stay on a platoon level. I would get to know them all very well, unless we were on a longer operation. If we were raiding a city, for example, I would want to be as small unit as possible because I'm going to be sticking with those guys. And there's a lot of times when if you're with a squad, that squad will actually split up to go do different things and assault a building, you know. So they'll break us into fire teams, and the fire teams individually assault a building rather than a company or a platoon. So at that point, I do need to be in a fire team. So need to know who I'm going with, rather than them telling me who I need to go with. I never gave them the opportunity to tell me who I needed to go with because I needed to be where I knew I needed to be. So I would tell them where I needed to be. Once you let them call the shots, they treat you like a boot and they just walk all over you. So you just can't do that.
So, with that being said, the treatment wise, embedding yourself and making sure it's known, did you have a particular favorite unit to work with in your time in your combat deployments and a least favorite unit to work with?
Man, my favorite is it's hard to say. My least favorite is not hard at all. I even know the guy. I can tell you the guy's name. I won't tell you his name. I'll tell you his nickname. And anybody who was in that unit at the time will know exactly who I'm talking about. But okay, so my favorite first.
Top three.
I sorry?
Top three then. If
Top three, top three. One of them is going to be second LAR. I loved LAR. When I was hit the idea, I was actually with LAR at the time, and everything I did with them, every operation I went on them with them, seemed meaningful. I felt like a Marine when I was with them. If that makes any sense. Like when I was working with these guys, I felt like I was with professionals. I felt like I was actually achieving a goal. I felt like they were a team. I mean, second LAR, man, they were on point. They had it together from top to bottom. Um, that is the kind of place where if you're just like if your uniform's fucked up for whatever reason, you got three guys offering you theirs. You know what I'm saying? Um, they all looked out for each other. They, dare I say, they loved each other. And it showed with their camaraderie, the way they performed. It was a badass unit. No, I have no regrets with going out on any operation with any LAR, especially second LAR. Just a bunch of badass dudes. 3-8 when I went with them to Haiti. They were really cool. You know, there were some in the unit who I didn't get along with. I think that's just to be expected. But for the most part, when I went out with the line, all of the grunts knew their stuff. They, it was good OJT for me, on the job training because it was my first combat deployment. And, you know, I had been a Marine for a couple years at that point, but I hadn't seen any real action. So being embedded with those guys that were really they weren't necessarily friendly to me, but they were friendly to learn with, if that makes sense. It's like reading a, I don't want to compare them to a children's book, but it's like going out with some units, it's like reading War and Peace, and going out with them was like see Dick run. You know what I'm saying? It was just easy to work with them. You know, I showed up, they facilitated my job. They were just doing their job. Everything was great, and they acted like a bunch of North Carolina hick Marines. Honestly, I mean I really liked that about them. They showed their true spirit, and 3-8 was a very good unit. You know, last but not least with 2-2. 2-2, I have they'll always have a place in my heart. I did a lot of training exercises with 2-2. I did a lot of deployments with 2-2. And I saw a lot of action in Iraq with 2-2. So they're a great unit, great battalion. Second Marines in general is pretty awesome. I was with RCT2, as you know, and when I was in Iraq. 2-2 is great. My least favorite unit, and it's not the unit's fault. It's the command's fault. And, you know, I'm going to kind of shame myself by telling you a story after I tell you who they are and why. Um, where I kind of did something somewhat disrespectful, but I got my revenge. Anyway, these guys, it was 3-2. 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. They're a pretty good unit. Like they're good guys. I never really had a problem with anyone within the unit. They performed, and once I got away from headquarters company and headquarters, they were pretty awesome. Getting away from headquarters is in 3-2 was like the most difficult fucking thing. You know, I've been with so many units, and when they see a lower rank, they look at me with question. They're like, "Who is this guy, and why is he telling me that I need to get him where he needs to be?" But once I explain, "Hi, I'm a combat cameraman. I'm here for intelligence, reconnaissance, historical documentation. I need to be on this operation for this purpose." The the CO sent me here at this time. Colonel Ross wants me to get the XX and X done, and I need to get all of the HVIs, HVTs, and all of the caches we taken and uploaded to him immediately. If I say that to a lot of staff NCOs, they're going to be like, "Okay, this guy knows his job. He knows what he's doing." If I say it to, and I'm going to say his name because fuck this guy in his face. If I say it to Gunny Christoph of 3-2, they called him Gunny Pissed Off because this guy was like I don't know, man. He was like the worst incel, like manlet little like insecure piece of shit human being I've ever. I mean, the guy like would go on these talks about for like 2 hours, like, well, I joined the Marines to be a grunt. I didn't join to be a photographer. Who goes in the Marines to be a photographer? And I'd be like, why do they pay me the same much? Is it the same amount as you, Gunny? Like, why am I getting the same pay and I get to go back in the rear, as you say? Why am I also sitting right next to you right now, Gunny? Anyway, this guy, he wouldn't give me my chow. Like he didn't want to feed me. He wouldn't give me water. He would never let me do my job. I would show up to the unit and I'd be like, Gunnery Sergeant, I need to get in with the line company, whoever's going to be at the tip of the spear. I'm going to be gathering intelligence, reconnaissance, historical documentation. I can stand post. I can do this. I need X, Y, and Z. Colonel Ross told me to come here and get this. I would give him the whole spiel and he'd be like, shut the fuck up, you pogue. You're on fucking radio watch. And I'd be sitting there on radio watch for the entire operation. And I would get back. And Colonel Ross would be like, what the fuck, McCall? Where are your photos? And I would tell him, like, Gunny pissed off. He did this, that, and the other the entire time. I was on fucking radio watch. And he would light a fire under their asses. I mean, like, I would get to listen to it. Like, I would hear our colonel, our full bird colonel, cussing out a first sergeant and a gunny because they were pieces of fucking shit. You were pieces of shit. Like the first sergeant and the gunny, everyone else was cool, man. Everyone else was great, but these guys did not want to let me do my job until one day. Until one day, we were, I think we were doing an assault on, I'm going to say Barwana, but I think it may have been Akashat, one of the smaller little towns out in the middle of nowhere. And we were doing an assault, and I showed up, gunnery sergeant. I'm your combat photographer. I'm here for intelligence, reconnaissance, historical documentation. Colonel Ross told me to get X, Y, and Z. I need to be with these guys, tip of the spear, blah, 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 blah. I give him the whole spiel. Shut up, Pogue. Sit the fuck down. You'll be on radio watch. And what would I do? What could I do? Like I would sit there. So they were with headquarters company when we did the assault. I was sitting there with them with my video camera, and we were about a click outside of the city. Well, the guys, they went down the hill. An RPG came flying through and like took one of their thumbs off. Like this guy was running, one of the Marines was running, and he had his rifle in his hands, and the RPG came through, and the fins on the little metal fins that fly out the back clipped his rifle, broke his rifle in half, and took his thumb off. And I remember they pulled him back, and me and him were joking. I was like, "You're going home, huh?" And he was like, "Fuck yeah!" So the whole time, all of them, that went on. They get to the city, they stack up on a wall, like right at the edge, and they push in. An IED goes off. I mean, it was nuts watching this assault. And I'm sitting there recording. I mean, I'm from a click away, but I zoomed in as far as I could without getting distortion. And I set the camera on a rock and I just let it go. And I was trying my best to get everything that was going on.
Brother, check your audio real quick. You're coming in real soft.
Oh, is this a little bit better?
There we go. It came right
Okay,
back.
yeah, I think I was a little too far back. So, so yeah, they do the assault. I get every bit of it on video, and then afterward, first sergeant, I see the gears turning in his head. He was like, "Wait a minute, hey McCall, did you film that assault?" And I was like, "Yes, first sergeant, I did. I needed to be down there inside of that assault, to do my job adequately because Colonel Ross said I need X, Y, and Z at the tip of the spear." I told them all of this. And that is when First Sergeant was just like, "Oh, I have a great idea. Why don't we put you with a fucking platoon?" So they actually pushed me out to a platoon after that because I showed them the footage I had on my video camera, and they in their heads were like, "Wait, we can have some video to take home with us." Not, "Wait, the Marine Corps needs this Marine to be doing his job." They were thinking, "Oh, we could have some gushy stuff to show to our families." So they actually embedded me with a unit and with a platoon. And from there, everything was great. That's actually when, the trifecta of toilets happened. That story I told you. I was actually with those guys at the time through a 3-2 where all three toilets were overfull. So I just
Brother,
kind of,
roll into that story. Like,
yeah.
that's one we need right now.
Oh, okay, yeah. So I was with those guys. They finally pushed me out, and I was with these dudes, and we I mean, one of the better platoons I've ever been with. I'm sitting here trashing their Gunny and their first sergeant, but and they were true pieces of shit. But these guys, they were great Marines. I showed up. I'm gonna do it one more time. I showed up. I was like, I went to the staff sergeant and the platoon sergeant. I was like, Staff Sergeant, I'm Corporal McCall. I'm a combat photographer. I'm here for intel, reconnaissance, historical documentation. I need X, Y, and Z according to Colonel Ross. I can stand posts, and I'm going to be going on whatever patrols you have that are high risk. And I remember the look on his face. He looked me up and down and was like, all right. And like that was it. I was in good with them. I stood post. I like went on every single patrol with them. I had a great time, but there were the fob that we had, it was like really impromptu. It was three houses. There was a road that went in between them. So there was one house on one side of the road, and I stayed in that one. And then two houses on the other side of the road. And I want to say the whole platoon was split into three, the three houses. I was with these, I was in the house with the platoon sergeant. They had a platoon guide. I didn't really see a guide very often, but they had one. Apparently he was a guy who was an eighth and I for like the most of his Marine Corps career, and then got sent to a line unit and didn't know anything. So they made him the platoon guide. He was just a guy who was just there, he was just some sergeant. No one really disrespected him, but they didn't really show him a lot of respect necessarily. But he did his job. He was a good Marine, just like everyone else there. Anyway, I remember we sat and we talked that night that I got there about the Philippines and Subic Bay, and we all had a good laugh about just being in Subic Bay. Because if you've been to Subic Bay, you're gonna laugh about it.
If you know, you
Um,
know.
so also, this is a good little story. In that same house, they had a satellite for TV. They had a TV with satellite, dude. So I hadn't seen TV in months at this point. I hadn't showered in probably 3 weeks. Hadn't seen a woman in, probably a month and a half. And then it was a Marine, I'm not disrespecting them whatsoever, but that's my sisters, I'm not like looking to, yeah, that's weird. So, I hadn't seen a woman in a while, and we got the TV working. And at this time, the Dukes of Hazzard movie had just come out, and what was it? Jessica Simpson. It was Jessica Simpson, right? She was Daisy Duke. And the music video, we turned the TV on, and the music video was playing, and it was all zoomed in on her body. And I mean, it's like she's like, oh. So it was this like the squad of Marines. We're all just sitting there with our jaws to the floor, like, watching this video. And man, I'll never forget that time. It was really, really funny. And
Well,
most
dude,
houses
Johnny
in Iraq.
Knoxville is an actor and he plays Luke Duke. It's Johnny Knoxville, the guy from Jackass.
Yeah.
Crazy. Continue.
It
My
was
bad.
I never watched the movie. I watched the Duke Boys growing up. The Duke Boys helped raise me. Never watched the movie. Never interested in watching the movie. Was I was that day in particular, I was very interested in Jessica Simpson. Um, and we all were. It was really funny. I remember watching. I was kind of in a daze watching it, and our interpreter. We had an Iraqi national with us. He was our interpreter. He just started cracking up, and I looked over at him, and he was pointing at us. And he was just making fun of us because all of us were just entranced by Jessica Simpson on the TV. But yeah, it was pretty funny. So anyway, the last day at that farm, we had set up, kind of concertina wire around blocking the road and around the houses. And I had been eating MREs for a while at this point, and I hadn't relieved myself in days. I hadn't pooped in days. And those MRE poops, if you've ever heard of them, they're pretty vicious. They stock up. That's the way they work. They stock up for a couple days. Day three, day four, man, they hit like a ton of bricks. Well, day three, day four hit, and they announced we were closing down the fob. And they started breaking down. They were like, everybody get up. We're breaking down. We're going to move out of here in like 30 minutes or something like that. And, I had just woken up. All my gear was everywhere. And, I had my satellite out. My computer was out. I had to pack it all up. But more than anything, I had to shit. It was hitting me like, I mean, it was like a ton of bricks in my gut. You know what I mean? They say you shit a brick. I had a ton of bricks in there. Ooh, a lot of chili mac, but I had to go really bad, so I went into the bathroom that was in the house. Again, it was three houses. I went into the bathroom of the house I was in, and it was disgusting. It was this hole in the ground kind of. It's like the flat floor, and then it's an oblong kind of toilet in the floor, and it's flat. Kind of, it's an Asian toilet, but they have them in the Middle East also, and they don't flush. What you do is there's a spigot in the bathroom to control the shower and a little faucet, and they have a pitcher in there. Every bathroom had a pitcher in it, and you just fill the pitcher up and you pour it in the toilet, just like flushing a toilet turns the water on. Well, they just turn the water on. Same concept. Marines didn't know that. I guess a lot of these guys never encountered a non-flushing toilet, or they were just sitting there turning the water on, thinking they were doing something because this thing was completely overfilled. I mean, it was like a flat floor with a pile coming up like that of just, I mean, feces and toilet paper. It was just disgusting. And my stomach was wrenching at this point. So I was like, okay, I got to get across the street, see what's going on. So I got all my gear up. I had my flak jacket half on, my rifle in my hand, my pack on, and I was just running across the street. And I busted into the second house, and I see it. They're just tearing everything down, and all the Marines are moving all their gear out. And I'm like, "Where's the head?" And one guy pointed over there, and I went over there, and I dropped all my shit, and I opened the door, and there was this pile. I mean, just it was disgusting. And I'm not going to squat over this, right? Like whoever did, because it became a pile. They kept adding to it, obviously. At some point, some degenerate was walking in there and was like, whatever, like squatted over this and kept adding to it. Like, who does that, So, I bet it was someone from North Carolina.
I've
Us South
seen our porta
Carolinians.
johns. We're pretty vile.
South Carolinians, we wouldn't do that. We're couth. We're couth misfits. Anyway, so I get all my gear up. I scoop my gear up. I'm like, not happening. And I go to the third house, and I bust into the front door. And by this time, all the Marines were gone. There were no more Marines in this house. I didn't know that, but the family that lived in the house, they had kind of moved back in, and they were standing in the little entrance living room area. And so I busted in, and they all kind of stopped and looked at me like, "What the fuck does this guy want?" And I looked over and I saw the bathroom, and I ran over there. I dropped my gear, kept my rifle because civilians here. Went into the bathroom and slammed the door. And I looked down, and the toilet was overflowed. I mean, it was just another big. The floor is here, and I mean, it was heaped. It was just disgusting. And I did what any good self-respecting human would do, and I pooped next to it. So I didn't squat over it. I squatted next to it, and I made a new pile. And I feel like that was the civilized thing to do. You know, why would I do that to myself? If I want to keep my dignity, I'm not gonna anyway. So I made a nice little pile. I finished. I had some toilet paper, cleaned myself up. Being the Southern gentleman I am, I didn't want to just leave it in its own separate pile. So I got some toilet paper and I pushed everything over to the big heap. Not into the heap, but next to it to consolidate the mess, I guess. That's just how kind of a soul I am. So I finished. I got up, and I was just like, fuck, this family's out here. So, I got out, I walked out and I closed the door behind me, closed the door behind me. And the family was just looking at me like I had a dick coming out of my forehead. I mean, they were looking at me like I was an alien. They were just like, "What is this guy doing?" And I got my stuff up and I left before they could find out. I didn't want them to know what I was doing. I'm sure they had already seen the bathroom. I kind of tell myself I hope they didn't see the bathroom so they don't know which was mine. Because if they go in there before I show up, they see what was. If they go in there after, they see what was and a little bit more. So yeah, anyway, great unit, great guys. I was embedded with them in the little three house fob for a little bit. We took a lot of fire up there because it was up on top of a hill. And on our side especially, we took machine gun fire a couple times. While I was up on watch on the rooftop. It was good. Anyway, so to finish my earlier story, 3-2 kilo. Gunny pissed off, and First Sergeant, what's his name? I don't even remember his name. But I go on through this whole operation, and I do a great job. I feel like the job I did on that operation out of my entire that entire 14-month Iraq deployment, I did best on that operation, anywhere because I got in with a good platoon. I gained their respect almost immediately, and the command allowed me to do my job. Um, the times, not just with this unit, that I've not been allowed to do my job or that I haven't been able to do my job, it's always some asshole higher up who doesn't allow me to do it. That's the only times I haven't done my job. So I go through this entire operation and I do a fucking smash up job. I get great photos, great video. And I'm about, the operation wraps up, and I have to head back to Al Assad. But before I, to go on another operation with a different unit. So before I had to hop back, I left that platoon, said my goodbyes, shook hands, handed them their burned CD of all their photos like I do. And I went back to headquarters so I could get a ride back to somewhere so I could hop in my helicopter and get out of there. And I get back to the fob. Gunny pissed off, just right away goes in on his shit about pogues and grunts and how we're useless and we get paid the same. I got useful skills that I can use outside of being a cop when I get out. But he wants to be angry, he can be angry. He's probably an alcoholic if he's even still alive. Um, Anyway, Gunny pissed off and the first sergeant. They kind of corner me and they asked to see some of my photos. And like I don't have my computer out or anything, but I'd show them on the little screen on my camera. It's like, yeah, I got this. I mean, this is great stuff. These guys were fucking awesome. And they say, well, can we get some of those? And I was like, you know what? If you come by Al Assad, come back combat camera, I'll see what I can do for you, first sergeant. So I knew I was leaving as soon as I got back. And these guys were rotating home. They had been there for 7 months at this point, and they were leaving, and I had 7 more months to go. I wasn't putting up with their bullshit. They stepped on my dick at every point. They did not let me do my job. They treated me like shit. They put me on radio watch most of the time. Um, they really treated me like ass. So. I was gone, and one of the Marines I worked with, another combat cameraman, he was sitting at Al Assad RC-22 combat camera when Gunnery Sergeant pissed off and First Sergeant what's his name come walking into the office. And they're like, "Hey, we had Corporal McCall on this operation with us, and he told us that we could get CDs and DVDs and pictures and a couple of printouts for us." And I feel kind of bad for leaving my Marine, like my fellow Marine, hanging like this, but he was like, "Huh? I don't know what the hell you're talking about." Everything, nothing had been declassified. Like nothing, I hadn't gotten anything released. I didn't print out anything. I didn't burn a CD or a DVD for these guys. Fuck every one of them in their faces. I feel bad for the Marines in the platoon I was with, but I gave them burnouts of their photos. I gave them everything. Yeah, First Sergeant Gunny pissed off. They can eat a dick. To this day, I stand by what I did. A lot of people will say it was unprofessional or the Marine I ended up that had to talk to them and tell them I don't know what you're talking about. He didn't leave anything for you. I'm sorry. He kind of got on me. He was like, dude, that sucked. I had to fucking like sit there and tell him. It's like, I'm sorry, but you're never gonna see them again. Like, who fucking cares, man? Like, screw them. Maybe next time they'll let me do my job. So I had three favorite units, one resounding least favorite unit. And the least favorite unit wasn't even because of the unit, it was because of the headquarters company gunnery sergeant and the headquarters company first sergeant.
Damn. That's a phenomenal um
I'm sorry,
tell there.
Kilo company, not headquarters. Sorry, go ahead.
For the book that we're gonna do. That chapter is gonna be titled "The Revenge of Corporal McCall."
Yeah, man. I had no problem giving out photos to people. I obviously I understood why they wanted them, and just the documentation, not of yourself, but of your Marines doing their
Right on.
job, using that stuff in the future for training, using it for any number of reasons. Once they got back to Lejeune, and RCT-2 rotated back to Lejeune. All of Second Marine Division combat camera was back at Lejeune, and they archived everything. Fucking First Sergeant, what's his name, and Gunny dipshit can go to, Division Combat Camera and access the archives if they want to. They can ask for everything to be released. They can ask for the photos. They can request whatever, printouts and all of that shit. I didn't feel like I did anything bad by them. I feel like they were completely and totally unfair to me. And because of the Pogue grunt rivalry that is this imagined bullshit idiocy, they actually interfered with the Marine Corps' mission. I wasn't sent there on my own volition. I wasn't like, oh, I want to go chill with Kilo 3-2, I was sent there by a colonel who was in charge of our entire regimental combat team. I talked to him personally before I went. Every single operation, we all talked to him regularly. Like we saw him all the time. Not everyone did, but just the nature of my job, typically I'll work for a staff NCO, and then in most units, I work directly for the operations officer after that. So, I'll have a staff NCO and an officer, but and like a gunny and a major between me and the XO and the colonel. That's it. That's my chain of command. So,
Well, hell yeah. Man, that's like I said, we're in interview. Technically, I think this is 3.5. That's what I'm classifying it as. And we have so much more to cover, dude. But it's sad that you bring up the point there, though, of how your job was impacted by people who looked less at you because your MOS did not start with O3, even though you were being put in the same situations as the O3s. On that note, I need to take a short break to let out my dog and to relieve myself and break the seal before we come back for more. So I will be back in 10, my friend.
all right, man.
Oh, man. So picking back up where we've left off, Kevin, after the little break, and to end out this segment and to get back some of the lost conversation we had due to the file corruption there, I wanted to end out today because we've had some pretty serious talks. And as I told you, whenever we have these talks, I like to end out on positive notes. I just think that's respectful. That's just my take on things. Um, but to follow up the shit in 3-2 debacle, respect to 3-2 outside of the first sergeant and the Gunny of Kilo specifically. Um, you
What was the
had
gunny's name?
pissed off. There you go.
Pissed,
Yeah.
pissed
Res-
off Kristoff.
Um, you had some interesting experiences going through some mansions that
Hmm.
Saddam had given his generals. But I wanted to talk about one, the beauty of these mansions, because I know when we talked about it the first time, it's jaw-dropping to see these homes and what they're made out of, but also some of the interesting finds that you found as a CC. Go ahead and take it away, Kevin.
So, a lot of these houses, we were doing, I'm pretty sure this was during River Sweep. I don't think it was during another operation, but I may be mistaken. 20 years ago. Um, so at one point we came across this whole section of the Euphrates River. I want to say it was probably about 5 miles of river. On either side of the river, there were these mansions. And I say mansions, they're not what you would think of as like a Western ideal of a mansion. They weren't necessarily massive. They were big. I mean, they were bigger than my house here. Mine got a pretty big house, but they weren't taking up acres and acres of land. And it wasn't some house with or some building with 300 rooms. It was probably like 50 rooms. I mean, that's still huge. But it's when I say mansion, you would think like this massive house that you see on like the Kardashians or something, but it's not that big. It's like a 3-story ranch house, if that makes any sense. But the luxury behind these places is what makes it a mansion. The whole building is solid marble block. Um, it's not marble plated. It's solid fucking marble. Like they have carved huge chunks of marble and brought it and set pillars up in their house. The walls are made of stacked blocks of marble. I mean, the floor is the most beautiful marble mosaics I've seen in my life. I've been to a lot of places. The most beautiful marble mosaics I've seen in my life were in Iraq, in these generals' houses. The people who lived there in the surrounding areas, there were a lot of, not wealthy people there, but for whatever reason, they hadn't raided these houses. I think it may have been out of fear or whatever, but no one was bothering these houses at all because when we went there, they were all but untouched. I remember one in particular, I walked up and it was blue marble. It was this really deep, not like a navy blue, but more of a like a turquoise blue, but a little bit darker. And all of it had these white veins of quartz through it. It was beautiful. Just the striations within it were just gorgeous. And we opened the two front doors, and they were these huge, solid oak doors, which oak doesn't grow anywhere near Iraq. But they had these two massive solid oak doors that were just beautiful, and they had these carvings on them. And anyway, they swung inward, and right there was a throne with a tiger skin rug and like there were paintings all over the walls with these really like golden frames and peacock feathers everywhere. It was incredible, absolutely stunning homes. And I actually slept in a few of them along the way. So whenever we're on these operations, wherever we decide to sleep is wherever we decide to sleep. And we stayed in those houses because they had been, the whoever was living there had ran away. I'm assuming they ran away right before we showed up. They probably stayed there until they heard Americans were nearby, and then they deuced. Maybe that's why the houses hadn't been emptied out by the locals. I don't know. Because if I was near one of those houses right now, they were emptied out, and it was like up for grabs. I might swing by. Not gonna lie, especially I wouldn't take any of the wealth. I would take the big tiger skin rug. Anyway, so within these houses, they all had air conditioning, which was beautiful. I remember sleeping well. I slept very well because it was cool inside. Even at nighttime in the desert, it's just sweltering. I would sweat in my sleep. But part of my job as combat cameraman was whenever we would find media, everyone would pass it off to me. And I would have to preview it and see if it was worth sending it up the chain or just destroying it right then and there. And a lot of it I just destroyed right then and there. As an intelligence gatherer, I'm kind of somewhat trained on what is and what isn't intelligence, watching some bootleg version of uh, Triple X, the Pitch Black movie or whatever with not Triple X, but yeah. So it was the Pitch Black movie with Vin Diesel. I found they had that, and I was like, "What the?" Maybe it was Triple X. I can't remember whichever it was that was out in 2005. Some Vin Diesel movie, something like that. And then I found their homemade porn, which was some old dude with some woman who was in hijab. Like she would pull it up and they would do their business. You really couldn't see a whole lot, but it was pretty interesting because there were a lot of noises. There's not a lot to see, but a lot of noises. And the woman would never uncover her face. I know they had a lot of brothels here and there throughout Iraq. I never encountered any of them, but that may have been a prostitute that he was with in some of these videos. I don't know. This guy in particular, I'm thinking of. Um, there were some family videos, and then there were just a ton, and I mean a ton. Probably like in this one house, he probably had 30, 35 beheading videos. Like I say a ton, and you think, oh, 35 is not a ton. But when you're talking about beheading videos, five is a ton, dude. Like 30 something beheading videos in your home in a stack of DVDs with your homemade porn and Vin Diesel movies. Like, what is this person? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this has to be, I mean, the most despicable. Anyway, it's the type of person who goes into government, I guess. They had some really just rotten stuff. And A lot of the beheading videos, I had to watch them all and see, some of them would be Western people. Most of them were Iraqi people, I'm assuming, that had helped foreign occupation forces in some way, or they just didn't, cater to the Mujahideen who came in, or they were one of Saddam's peoples, all this stuff. None of it was dated necessarily. Old video cameras, they used to imprint the time and the date down in the bottom if you set the time and date, which they, usually hadn't. And then it had been digitized and burned to DVD. A lot of quality was lost in between, and you can't really date stuff like that, especially when the background is sand and they're all wearing what Iraqi people have worn for 50, 60 years. I mean, it all looks the same. So I had to go through all these videos and pass it up the chain. And every now and then, just for shits and giggles, I'd pass some of the homemade porn up and send that to Intel. I've never heard anything about it, but I'm sure there was some Intel analyst who got just a stack of DVDs from Corporal Kevin McCall, and he was just like putting them in one by one, like, "Oh, this is terrible," and we take it out. "Oh, this is terrible, take it out." Oh my God, what is this? That's a lot of hair I'm looking at right now. So, yeah, they had a lot of porn. They had it was in the era of Girls Gone Wild too. So they had a lot of Girls Gone Wild. Yeah, it's funny we're talking about this because at pretty much every fob there was this is kind of it's kind of prejudiced in some way, but in the moment we were a bunch of dumb kids, we didn't know any better, but we called it Haji vision. So a Haji is someone who has made is a Muslim who has made the Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca. So if you're a Haji, you have made the pilgrimage to Mecca. So we're all dumb fucking little redneck kids calling all these people Hajis, and they're like, I'm not a Haji. I haven't made the pilgrimage to Mecca. They don't know that we're calling them that out of whatever. I mean, I guess every single war has had their prejudice slang names thrown around, and Haji was just the one that somebody picked out. Anyway, I forget where I was going with that. What were we saying? I'm sorry.
Haji vision at every fob.
Oh yeah, the Haji Vision. So we called it Haji Vision, but you would buy some bum DVD and it would have like three movies written on the front, and it would have three movies on it, and they were usually like brand new movies that were in theater in the U.S. And somehow, little fucking dude, whoever the hell, is sitting in the middle of the desert. This little Bedouin guy, and he has tons of copies of it, and they're selling them. And it was, I want to say it was like $5 per DVD, and every DVD had at minimum three movies on it.
That's a
Some of them
steal.
had, yeah, some of them had more. Well, he was paying like 10 cents tops for them. So you know what I mean? Like he was paying nothing for all of this. And I actually had a friend, he was an interpreter when I was in Rutbah. He had been a professor, a college professor in Baghdad. And when the war kicked off and everything, like long story short, his entire family had been executed. And he was 50, I want to say he was like 54 years old, old guy. He was a really nice dude. And he and I had some really good late night conversations over cigarettes. We would just sit there, cigarettes, chai, and we would talk till the early hours. And the guy was so smart. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what everyone's, conception of an Iraqi is, but they're not, I mean, they're really well educated, very intelligent people, for the most part. If you go if you go west out into the desert, you're going to find a lot of I mean, going out west in Iraq is like going into the deep south, and it's like going to Possum Kingdom, South Carolina, and that is the name of a real place. That is the name of a town, Possum Kingdom, South Carolina. You're going into the backwoods, you know what I mean? So you gotta be prepared, but there's still a lot of educated people in the backwoods. And Najee anyway, he was really good because every time he would go to visit, he would go on our interpreters, they would come and work for us, but they would get leave. Every like a month they were given 2 days or 3 days they can go wherever, and we would take them. So he went back to Baghdad, and whenever he would come back from Baghdad, he would bring a little box just full of DVDs, and they weren't like in cases. It was just completely plumb full of loose DVD discs just thrown in there. And they all had writing on them in Arabic. And it was every bit of it was pornography. And I mean, I'm talking about like a box full, thousands, just so much porn. And it was weird stuff. It was stuff from like Germany, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia. I mean, it's just like you would see some strange stuff, but not
Illegal.
no, not all of it.
Oh, that's good.
Not the stuff. Okay, I that's where I was kind of going with the story. I never got anything illegal, but Najee disappeared one day, and I was like, "Where's Najee? What happened?" And they said he was selling child porn. What happened is he would go to Baghdad and he would buy those box, but he would just be like, "Give me a box," and they would give him a box full of DVDs, and he would bring them back and sell them for $1. And he sold one to some guy and he took it back to his hooch and put it on and it was child porn and he turned it in and Najee got fired immediately. I feel bad for Najee because there's no law. I don't, to my knowledge, there were no laws for that in Iraq. Obviously, we as Americans are going to follow American law as well as the local law of wherever we are. But I felt bad for him because he would buy these boxes. He didn't know what was in it. That doesn't excuse the fact that it existed and was being distributed, obviously.
Right on.
But he was somewhat of a victim as well in the whole scheme of things. He didn't produce it. He didn't know that he was distributing it. I don't know that he knew it was wrong to distribute it. I don't think he had even gotten so far as to think about he was distributing it, you know? It was just hey, here's a box of porn, I'm gonna sell it. So reality strikes, people go to jail. He just got fired. Obviously, he didn't go to jail because I don't think it was illegal there, but he had worked for us and lost his entire family working for us and then got fired over that. It seemed kind of, I have mixed feelings on it. Yeah. But Haji Vision was a real thing. I bought a TV one time for $15 and put it in our hooch. I abandoned it because I was only there for like a month, but $15 for a TV for a month seemed like an affordable luxury. So I set the TV up. Sorry, you might not want to use this part when you're using all this footage, but I set the TV up in our hooch, right? And the night I got it, I set it up and I had a DVD player that I bought from him for like $5 from the guys who would run the Haji Vision sales. And I set it all up and it worked. I was so impressed that this fucking TV I bought worked. And I mean, it was like a 25-inch. It wasn't that big at all. But I put it on and I needed a DVD. I didn't have any DVDs. So I started asking everybody. And somebody handed me a DVD and I looked and it was porn. So I put the porn in and we're all crowded around this TV and there were probably like 4 or 5 of us at first. So I'm sitting like right in front of the TV as I'm sitting in front of you right now because I bought the TV, I set it up and I put it on and I turned it on. So I'm sitting right here and there were 2 guys over here and one guy over here. Next thing I know, I turn around and there's like fucking 20 guys behind me all watching this porn. And there's this guy sitting right behind me and he seems older. I mean, he was closer to 30 and he had this, the mustaches we all used to grow back then
Oh
and how
yeah.
they make you look like some deviant motherfucker. But he's sitting behind me with his little pedo stash and he's muttering to himself while this porn's going on right in my ear. So I keep having to turn around like, man, back up. And at one point I'm watching and I hear, I'm gonna get real close to make it like up the creepy factor for you. And he's like, yeah, put it in her ass. Right in my ear. And I'm like, no, no, no. And I turned it off. No way are we proceeding with this. So yeah, that was my TV version. But we got those movies all the time, $5 each. Um, that's yeah.
Oh man, that's the sad. See, the sad thing is that unfortunately, as you know, there is some. I'm gonna find a way to make a version of this that's shareable with a link only. That way it goes to the right people, like, active duty or prior Marines that had
Let's just put it.
experience in the
Let's just put it in
GWAT.
the podcast. We'll just put it in the podcast.
It's even better. And some Marine is going to be like, man, I had that experience in 2006. And it's like the exact same thing. And some other Marines, like, I had that experience in 2009. Like some weird deviant out there. It's a
And then some,
repeating.
yeah, some
Yeah.
guy's watching it, and he's like, "Yeah, that was me. I wanted her to put. I wanted him to put it in her ass." He was like some real bumpkin Southern guy too, because you heard the way I say he didn't say, "Yeah, put it in her ass." He was like, "Yeah, put it in her ass," and it was just, which made it so much creepier on so many levels. I don't know why, but it did.
It's the country bumpkin whisper, man. That's terrifying when you hear that. That's deliverance kind of vibes.
He
That's
was this close to me. I mean, he
uh
was like that close to my ear when he said it. He didn't, I don't think he meant for anyone to hear it. You know what I'm saying? I think he was just muttering to himself.
he was in the zone. I
He
mean,
was.
I honestly expected you to tell me that you were going to turn around over there and he's just over there whacking away,
You
and
know, somehow that's not as bad. How is that not as bad as him whispering in my ear? Oh man. These are all North Carolina Marines too. That's I was with Second
Oh,
LAR at that time. That's those North Carolina boys. They're weird, man.
I'm just gonna drink my beer, and that's my answer to that. No comment. Plead the fifth on that one, man. Kevin, brother, as always, this was a phenomenal interview. Man, thank you for opening up, telling your story, the good, the bad, the ugly, but to me, especially today, more importantly, the fucking hilarious. The like, I love to hear it all. I do, but it is so funny, and so awesome to see you recount the most absolutely diabolical stories about pooping versus also talking about people whispering dirty things in your ears in a group full of 20 Marines. Because when I'm from my civilian perspective and the GWAT guys I know, this is the Marine Corps for a lot of you guys that deployed and had this
Right.
experiences in the FOBs. Like that's that.
Yeah. Yeah, we were on top of each other in a lot of ways. Yeah, we I mean we would live in these little hooches that are probably 20 foot by 10 foot, and there's like, I mean 40, 30 or 40 of us in there just stacked up. So yeah, I mean we're muttering in each other's ears, I guess, and it's creepy as hell. But we I think we all loved each other all the more for it.
From muttering in
And
the ears to bouncing off the cum covered Porter John walls to Wagner loves cock. It
Wagner does love that cut.
Kevin, I will get up with you probably Sunday for free, my man. And we'll do a continuation and continue this. But man, as always, thank you for your service and welcome home, brother.
Appreciate it, man. Thanks.